Bună dimineața. That's good morning in Romanian, and I'm calling that out in Romanian because today I'm driving a Dacia Logan, which is a cheap and cheerful, emphasis on cheap, emphasis on cheerful, little car made here in Romania by Renault, or Renault if you grew up in the States in the 80s as I did. It is basic transportation, no frills. I couldn't even find a clock. And as I'll show in a little while, the cup holders are some of the funniest things I have ever seen. But let's give this a try. Let me go ahead and show some of the oddities of this vehicle. First off, opening the trunk. And as you can see, it's got plenty of space. It's fairly nicely finished. And the floor lifts up to show a full-size spare, although this car has quite a bit of water down in there, so I'm not sure if there's a leak on it or not. Now let's step inside, see what she sounds like. The interior is cheap and cheerful, just like the rest of the vehicle. The plastics are fairly hard, but totally acceptable in a car that in the UK costs from like $59.95, less than 6,000 pounds. Gauges are legible, easy to read when driving in snowy traffic here in Bucharest in a car that I just got to know and kilometers that I'm not used to. It's got a decent radio. It even has a USB port. This model has air conditioning and power front windows. And of course, it's a manual, something that is getting so hard to come by outside of Europe. It is a clunky manual. It doesn't sound wonderful, but it goes into gear fine. It does have my least favorite reverse position over here below fifth. I always prefer it next to the first gear, but I guess that's probably because I'm used to driving mainly German cars with manuals. And let's fire her up. Regular key. European radio. Yeah, it's a cute little four-cylinder. Revs happy, drives happy, and it's a fun car. I mentioned when I was showing the outside of the car that it has the smallest cup holders I have ever seen. Here's a finger for just some comparison. And this water bottle, which is from the States and thus probably much larger, actually fits, which is just amazing to me because those look so small that I can't even imagine a 12-ounce Coke can fitting in there. I was joking with some friends earlier, sending pictures when I first picked this up, that you could fit a Red Bull can in there, or maybe one of those little Starbucks shot cups, or a shot glass itself. To make up for this, though, this car has one of the biggest glove compartments I have ever seen. It is so deep, I can get almost my entire forearm in there. And it has this neat little tray here. I guess you could put some Kleenex in there or something. And it's lit in a car for 6,000 pounds. I do like the rotating vents here. You can aim them pretty much wherever you want or close them off completely if you want more air to go to the windshield or to the footwells. It even has a little tray up here to store some things that you want to fly at you when you slam on the brakes. There's a lot of missing buttons in this model, so I guess there's a bunch more options you could get. Probably what heated seats, power rear windows. Interestingly enough, it has radio controls right here behind the steering wheel. And front and rear fog lights, as you would want to have in Europe, of course. Put all the lights on, so let's see what she looks like in a car that has never heard the word xenon or LED. Well, okay, maybe for the markers. Interesting that the rear fog is on one side and in the lower part of the bumper. Neat antenna. You don't see those very much anymore. The door pulls have an interesting, very fake carbon fiber look to them. But again, there's not much padding or comfort in this vehicle, but you get what you pay for. And you get quite a bit for what you pay for. I mentioned the gigantic glove compartment, but there's also this little net here. I'm not sure what you could actually fit in there. Maybe a cell phone or half of a cell phone, but nothing more than that. Climate controls are very straightforward, easy to use. And as I mentioned, this particular car does have air conditioning, unlike probably most that you would find in Europe, but it does get pretty hot here in Romania, so lots of places are air conditioned. Here on the center stack you have the hazard lights, which is fairly common, and of course the power lock button, which is quite noisy, but one thing I've noticed is there's no way to tell if the doors are locked or not on the door itself unless you try it. Unlocked. Hey, it unlocked all the doors when you do that. So I guess that's an interesting way to save a few lei on the purchase price, is not to put any of the little red things on the door handles or even the little buttons at the top that show whether or not the car can be exited. I've now hopped in the back seat, which has some map pockets, crank rear windows, as was common in European cars a while back. But again, this is the cheap and cheerful one. I actually left the seat in the same position as when I drove the vehicle here, and as you can see, I fit, but I wouldn't want to be here for too long. Thankfully, the back of the seat is actually soft and padded and not one of those hard plastic seat backs like you see in a lot of cars nowadays. So I could ride back here around town, and honestly, if the passenger was a shorter person and didn't need to have the seat as far back to drive, sitting on this side of the car would not be a problem. There's even a little pocket here, I guess, for additional cell phone storage. The car does have proper headrests in the back, even ISOFIX, so you could put in child seats here. And the seat does fold down, which would add greatly to the storage capacity because the trunk is quite large. And you know, this really is a cheap and cheerful car. I mean, you've even got adjustable seat belts, but they didn't cover the bolt except with this tiny cap. So you get the value of the adjusted seat belts without having to pay extra for the fancy plastic cover. You even see the exterior paint work here. It's not covered up by any plastic trim. Again, cost-saving measure, but it's basic transportation, and it drives just fine for 6,000 pounds. Oh, and here's the mighty power plant of the Dacia Logan, running in all its glory. You can actually feel it quaking like that when you drive the vehicle along, just sitting at idle. Interestingly enough, they did manage to soundproof the underside of the hood. There's a tiny battery, that's for sure. It has some pep, but I definitely wouldn't consider it to be a fast car. Getting out in traffic, I definitely spun the front wheels a little bit in this rainy, snowy condition that we have in Bucharest today. That being said, it did spin the front wheels a little bit, but it does get out from underneath itself, but you have to give it plenty of pep. Hope you've enjoyed the review of the 2017 Dacia Logan. It's 1.2 liter 90 horsepower engine. Definitely makes for cheap and cheerful travel. Come back to Doug's Car soon for another update.